This one, I'm really sorry. But come to the roundtable. We'll be doing a lot of actual diversity talk at the actual roundtable. But what I wanted to talk about today was tutorials. It's kind of a current passion of mine. It's kind of something that I'm very interested in because, frankly, in games, we really do a really bad job. And so it's a current interest, someplace I'm doing a lot of research and a lot of work, and currently working on a book on tutorials and how to structure them from games. So what I'm going to talk about today is tutorials and learning how to play. I am Sheri Graner. I started in the game industry in 1989 at Origin Systems. Actually, Warren hired me, so he hired me into my first job in the game industry at Origin. I started as a writer and a designer. Now, we didn't actually have the title designer back then. We had programmers and artists, and then we had programmers, artists, and writers. And so I was brought in as a writer, but I was really doing all the jobs that a designer does today. Since then, I've worked at a whole lot of places, Cartoon Network, Sony Online. I worked for the Defense Department doing some serious and some trading games. Most recently, I've worked with Shell Games, where I was the VP of design for Jesse up there. I have my own little studio, Zombie Cat Studios. But as of 3 weeks ago, I started working with EA in their mobile division as a senior designer there. And that just that's real new, so I'm very excited and having a really great time there, learning what they want me to do at EA. I am the founder of Women in Games International. I actually started that organization because I felt a need for a place where women could come together and talk about being in the game industry and what that meant. I wrote the book Gender Inclusive Game Design. I'm a hardcore gamer. I'm probably 20 hours a week gaming. When I'm not playing computer games, I'm playing board games and table games. I actually run a Dungeons & Dragons group that's been running for 20 years. We play every Monday night. Don't call me on Monday night. I don't answer the phone because I'm busy running my game. And it's the same guys every Monday night. Actually, we're currently playing Pathfinder and Edge of Empire, Star Wars Edge of the Empire. So I'm going to talk about tutorials. As I said, tutorials are kind of a current interest of mine. I'm working on a book on tutorials and tutorial structures for the game industry, and really, frankly, we do a really bad job. Producers don't like tutorials because usually they're at the end of the project and there's not enough time and they're busy scheduling and they have to figure out how to squeeze a tutorial into their timelines for developing it. Programmers really don't like tutorials because they've been working on the game for 6 months or more straight, and the last thing they want to do is try to figure out how somebody would try to think to learn to play it. Designers and artists don't like it because they're busy crunching to get the last bit of content into the game. Marketing really doesn't like them because what they really want is something they can take out and show to people, and that's what they think the tutorial is going to be, and it never turns out to be right. And frankly, nobody likes them. Nobody likes tutorials. And yet tutorials are our first impression with our gamers. It's the first impression they get of our game, the first impression they get of us, and frankly, we blow it. We don't know how to do tutorials. So I'm going to talk about some things about tutorials today. We're going to talk about learning acquisition. We're going to look at some examples of some tutorials. We're going to talk about what goes into a tutorial, and we're going to talk about tutorials and the direction tutorials are going today. So when we start talking about tutorials, we have to think about how do people learn. And you know, we're all familiar with some of the age-old ideas about learning. There's audio, people that learn primarily through listening to things. There's visual, people who learn by want to see the charts and see things. There's the kinetic learners. Those are the people that want to move while they're learning. They're not people who learn by doing. We all learn by doing, but they're people who want to move while they're learning. If you've ever been around a kinetic learner, a real strong kinetic learner, they're really fun. I actually officed with one for about 2.5 years. And he actually would begin to bounce. And pretty soon he was literally bouncing back and forth across the room and waving his arms, so much so that when we were trying to do quiet time and he was sitting at his desk, he would lean back and he would be moving his hands to where he was actually moving the information with his hands as he was working. So kinetic learners want to continually move while they're learning. However, if you talk to anybody today, people say this stuff isn't even real anymore. There's a lot of the educators today are talking about that everybody's a blend of these two, or they have a changing of these two, and maybe these don't even exist. So it's kind of hard to even think or talk about that. So one thing we are going to talk about, one thing we do know that exists, are the learning acquisition modes. And there are two learning acquisition modes. There's explorative, bless you. There's explorative and there's modeling. Two different ways that we acquire the knowledge or prefer to acquire the knowledge. Both of these types, it is in how the person deals with risk and with the risk in taking, the risks that they take while they're learning. No, we're not talking about the board game. So, let's talk about explorative learners. People who are explorative learners, they want to take a risk and experience the ramification of that risk right away. This is something they want to do. So they want to, just let me try it, just let me do it, get out of my way, I want to just deal with it. I want to have the experience of it, and I want to experience that risk. So explorative learning is experiential learning. It's the experience of the ramification of the risk. They actually enjoy that. That's the way they want to understand what's happening. So a real good way to think about this is think about if you've gone to an arcade, and if you have an explorative learner, you give them a token. They walk into the arcade. The explorative learner walks up, throws that token into the first machine and goes, "How does this work?" That's an explorative learner. That's somebody who is learning by taking the risk and experiencing what happens when they take the risk. Modeling learners are a little bit different. Modeling learners want to understand the ramification before they take the risk. So modeling learners are the ones who say, what's going to happen when I do that? I want to know what's going to happen. What's going to happen when I do this? What's going to happen when I push that? What's going to happen when I go over there? So modeling learning tends to be an imitative or a patterning learning. They pattern what they're doing on what they have seen or what is shown to them. They're going to want to understand what happens and then follow that same path to make sure that that is indeed what happens to them. They want to understand what happens before they take the risk. So if we go back to this arcade example, so you've got your explorative learner and they walk up and they throw the token in. How does this work? What's the modeling learner doing? The modeling learner is probably standing behind them, watching. Modeling learner is the one who says, no, I don't want to do it, I just want to watch you. They want to understand what's going to happen. So, if we take this for example, so we've got an arcade, right? And you hand each of these people a token. If you hand that explorative learner walks right up, throws the token in, we've got their money. What's the modeling learner do? Modeling learner walks from machine to machine, watching the attract loops, watching other people play. Now, unfortunately, arcades are not really designed to attract that kind of a learner. They're designed to attract the explorative learner. Wow, explosions, great fun. The modeling learner sticks the token in their pocket and walks out the door. Because nothing in there has explained to them what's going to happen when they put that token in or what's going to happen when they push the button. Unfortunately, most of our tutorials today are built for explorative learners. And this means our modeling learners walk away with their money in their pocket. So we put a barrier to their access right there at the front door and are not letting them into our games because we're not handling how they want to learn how to play the game. So I want to back up, and this is my disclaimer. Explorative learning has no relationship to exploration game style. How many of you have taken the Bartles test and know about killers, socializers? Okay, if you haven't, you should. It's a good part of what we do when we do design. You should know the 4 types of players by the Bartles test. Bartles divides players into 4 types: killers, achievers, socializers, and explorers. And they says that everybody is a blend of two of those. Explorative players are the ones who want to get out and explore every corner of the map and explore everything that they can do, find everything they can do in the game. It is perfectly possible for a modeling learner to be an explorative player. Remember, the modeling and the explorative I talk about is how they are acquiring the information to play the game. Also, explorative learning, as I said earlier, explorative learning does not relate to learning by doing. We all learn by doing. It's a matter of how we approach that learning. Modeling learners learn by doing too. They just want you to show them first, or they want them to explain to you first how it happens, or what's going to happen when they do things. So, does anybody recognize this? Okay, this is World of Warcraft in one of its early stages. So, I will admit up front, I'm a modeling learner. without a doubt. I'm a very strong modeling learner. So I was working on Star Wars Galaxies. I was content lead on Star Wars Galaxies, and I was working on it when World of Warcraft was really, really picking up speed and gaining a lot of popularity. And we had to play it. We were told, you're going to play this game. It's our big competition. We're like, all right. So I went home and I played it, and my husband was already a player. And he came home, and I was just fuming. I was sitting at my desk with the machine, and I was just so angry. And he said, what's wrong? And I said, I can't figure out how to sell something. I've got all this stuff in my inventory, and I've got to get it out. And I click on the guy, and I try to drag the stuff, or I can't figure it out. He says, well, why didn't you use your help? I said, what help? He says, well, there's all those exclamation points at the bottom. Just click on it. And I went, no one told me to. Nowhere did they say, click on this exclamation point to get your help. So I clicked on nothing because no one told me that I should click on that, and that's what would happen, because I'm not going to randomly click on things on the screen without knowing what it's going to do first. Very typical modeling learner. And so, consequently, when I start playing a new game, I literally have to tell myself, be explorative. Start to be an explorative learner. Click on everything, because it is not my natural inclination to do so. So, the next question I usually get is people say, okay, tell me some great tutorials. Tell me who does this right. And I really wish I could. There are people in games and places that have done bits and pieces of it right, but there really isn't anybody, any place in the game industry that I can say, that is a really great tutorial. That hits all the buttons. Now, you may not recognize this guy, but this guy's really common on late night television. Learn to use your computer now. And it's like the silly Ronco commercials where the guys, no human being can do everything right and the computer's falling off the desk and all that. Well, this is this guy. They do it right. They understand how to teach people things, particularly modeling learners, but just everyone in general. They really do a very good job of it. These guys also do it right. They really understand how to reach out and to teach. So what does it look like to do it right? This is what it looks like. If you're going to teach somebody to turn a table into text, you would say, we're going to explain to you what to do. We're going to explain what will happen when you do that. We're going to show you what will happen. And then we're going to allow them to try it. Now, here's where the games, I've seen this a lot, there are games that do this, no question. But here's where we always get it wrong. Allow them to repeat the activity until they're comfortable enough to say, I'm ready to move on. How many of you have ever played a tutorial where it just goes so fast that there's just no way you can learn this? Right. I can name 6 or 8 of those that I would tell you right off the bat. This has just driven me crazy. So that's very important. Okay. Now for you explorative learners out there, probably more than half of you are saying, if I had that tutorial right now, I would be screaming and tearing my hair in frustration. That would drive me completely crazy, right? How many? This would drive me crazy? Yes. Being explorative is fine. Yes. For an explorative learner, that would drive you completely insane. And that's why we add a skip button. Because frankly, your explorative learners are going to click on it anyway. You might as well give it to them. Because explorative learners are going to click on everything on the screen. So just give them a skip button. Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't have any hard numbers, so I didn't put it up on a slide because I don't want anybody copying this down because we don't have the finished numbers yet. I'm currently working with a university in Norway, and we're doing some studies on this exact thing, this learning methodology. And what we're finding is our modeling learners will move slowly toward explorative the more comfortable they get with the interface in the game. And they don't become explorative learners, but they become more explorative in what they're doing. And what we're seeing so far, and like I said, I don't have final numbers, is that at this point, it's very personal at what point they decide to become more explorative in what they're doing. And it becomes at what point do they become comfortable enough with the interface to say, I'm ready to move on. And this is also why putting a skip button is so important, because not only is it there for your explorative learners, it's there for your modelers when they're like, got it, okay, I'm ready to move on. So yes, they should be able to repeat a section until they're ready to hit the skip forward button and move on. So, if you're going to build a tutorial, what goes into a tutorial? How should you build a tutorial? So, let's say I'm going to build a game about driving from Austin to Madison. All right? I'm going to build a game about this. What would go in this game? Well, we might talk about if there's any particular toll roads. Maybe they have to figure out how to have money for the toll road. Maybe there's traffic that we have to figure out how to navigate or get through traffic. Maybe there's some beautiful scenery, so we have to have some really nice art to really pick this out. Maybe there's like really great places to stay, and so we have to figure out about rest cycles and regaining the energy. And maybe there's some really confusing things that they have to try to figure out how to get through the different loops. I think that's probably Chicago. They have to figure out how to get through it. How many of you in here would think that maybe what I've got to do is teach them how to start the car? This is where we fail with tutorials. We never teach them how to start the car, or we pass it over and gloss over it so quick. Tutorials should be about how to drive the car, not all the other stuff that's going on in the game. So, when we're doing our tutorials, we need to concentrate on nouns. Now, if you went to school, we all know that a noun is a person, place, or a thing. Definitions are very important. Explaining what they need to, what it is they're going to be. You know, a snoofera is nothing until you explain to them, this is what that is. Please don't define jargon with jargon. If somebody asks you what WASD is, don't tell them it's a movement system for an RPG game. That's not the way to do it. Jargon is really funny too, because in my book, the Gender Inclusive Game Design book, I worked really hard to make sure that it was readable for a layperson or for somebody who was not very distinctly in the game industry, because we have a language all our own. And I thought I'd done a really good job until my mom read it, at which point she called me up and said, "This is really great, but I'm at this part of this chapter. What's an FPS?" To us, we all know what that is. But to a new person, that's a whole different language. So you make sure that you're not defining your jargon actually with more jargon. Don't assume everyone knows, and certainly don't think, well, a real player would know that. This is a battle I fight all the time, particularly when I'm working with some of the bigger companies, when I did some work with Cartoon Network and some of the others, is, well, my players already know that. Really? Then you're concentrating on a smaller and smaller and smaller player base. We have a lot of players out there that are coming in that are new to the whole idea of gaming. We cannot assume that they already know all the things that we know. And certainly, if you've been working on a game for 6 months, of course you know it. So don't assume that don't assume that my mom, who I then took on to learn to play some MMOs with me, she didn't know what an FPS was. So you need to start simple. Keep it simple. And understand that you will have new players, because we all want those new players, because they're spending money too. Concentrate on the verbs. This is a real interesting one. If you don't take anything else away from this talk, this is the one I want you to really remember. Concentrate on the verbs that describe the action of the game. The shoot, the find, the hunt. What are the verbs that describe what it is they're doing? What are the verbs that describe how you move in the game? How do they move? Is it running? Is it dogging? Is it dodging? Is it ducking? Concentrate on those and making sure they understand what those verbs are and what they mean. There have been a lot of games that, use the duck feature, and I'm like, what does that even mean, and how do I even do that? Concentrate on making sure they understand how to communicate with the game. They understand where the help is, but they also understand how to talk. If this is a RPG and there's some conversation, understand how that they can talk. This was part of my problem with where I couldn't figure out how to make the shopkeeper talk to me. I didn't understand that interface, and it never was explained. Understand that they need to understand how to communicate with the game in whatever fashion the game is communicating. So if we break this down, what this really comes down to is shoot, move, communicate. If you guys have worked on FPSs or know any of that phrase should be very important to you. Shoot, move, communicate. Those are the 3 things we need to teach in our tutorial. Nothing else. That's where we start. So basically what I'm saying is, teach them how to actually use the program. How does the interface actually work? How do I actually move? What keys do I use? What controls do I use to actually interact with the game? Do not teach them how to achieve the goal of the game. They'll figure that out, and that's actually part of the fun when they're in the game, is discovering what the goal of the game is. Teach them how to actually mechanically use it. Do not be afraid of breaking the fourth wall. This is the one I have the hardest time getting designers to talk to me about, because they're like, no, it'll sully my vision, my beautiful vision, I can't talk to them. No, if you don't explain to them how to put the key in the ignition, they're never going to enjoy your driving game. If you don't explain to them how they can walk, what WASD means, and how to make that character move, they're never going to walk around and enjoy the wonderful world you've created, because they're going to be too busy fighting with their controls and their interface. Teach them and talk to them as players. You can break the fourth wall. As I said, don't explain the goal of the game. Do not explain the precise systems, special cases, edge cases, complex things. They'll figure, once they understand how to use the interface, they will figure these things out and they will learn these things. Now, I have a favorite story about this. I played City of Heroes pretty obsessively from pre-beta. I was in the pre-beta group all the way through to the night they shut the servers down. Another City of Heroes fan? Yeah? Man, I loved it. That was my game. But here's what you guys did. So you added an enhancement system, which was really, really great, but this is how they put it in the tutorial. In the tutorial, I got handed a wall of text, which was, this is what you don't do. And this was a system that did not become important to the players till far along in the game and far along in what they were doing. This was not something that needed to be explained at the very beginning of the game. And besides, nobody reads wall of text anyway. Now, this is the one that I get all the time. In fact, 3 weeks I've been at EA, and I sat down, and the person working in the tutorial said, we've got this great tutorial, why don't we just put it right in the game? Okay, well, if you like just, throwing people into the deep end with not knowing whether or not they can swim, okay. This is a hard thing. I won't say you can never put the tutorial into the game, but there's some caveats to it. You can put the tutorial in the game only if there is no time pressure. Can you imagine trying to teach somebody to play chess in speed chess? That's what putting the tutorial in the game is like, if there's any kind of time pressure on them. You can only put the tutorial in the game if there is zero cost for failure. And that means they don't lose anything. They don't lose anything that takes any amount of time or cost to regain. They don't lose levels, they don't lose lives, they don't lose, lives is the best one. They don't go in and lose their lives and have to start over. Only put the tutorial in the game if there's a safe place that allows them to practice. Remember what I said earlier about the modeling learners wanting to be able to repeat an action until they're ready to move on? You need to give them a safe place where they can do that, where they can practice, where they're safe, where they're not going to get ganked, where they're not going to actually lose their armor pieces, where they're not going to, lose something that's irretrievable. They need a safe place to practice. Because frankly, if you just throw your tutorial into your game, this is what it feels like to a lot of people. You wouldn't stick a student driver into the Porsche Nationals. So tutorials today are a very interesting subject. We see a lot of things happening and moving and changing. We've got games that are becoming small and short. We've got mobile games, really hard to put tutorials into mobile games. We've got games that are big, and again, how do you put a tutorial into this? What we're finding more and more, our players are moving to online media to learn how to play their game. So as far as online media, streaming, YouTube, bloggers, streamers, vloggers, YouTube, we're finding that over 50% of the millennials out there today are using this as a way where they're learning how to do things. This is important because these are our audience, right? And I've worked with a lot of teams that have told me, man, we're going to get the big bloggers, we're going to get the big YouTube guys, we're going to get them to talk about our game, and it's going to be great because they have 30 million subscribers. And that's really fine until this becomes your mouthpiece to your gamers. Sure, we'd all like to have PewDiePie's audience, that would be great, but do we really want him speaking for our games? Do we really want somebody we can't control talking about our games and teaching our players about our games? Probably not. So who could be teaching your players? And that's you. I work real hard with companies to try to get them to understand that they have the best resources ever for teaching games. The #1 best tutorial ever is other players. That's your best tutorial. If the developers and the companies would think about it, they can reach into their, let me tell you, QA, hands down the best people to talk to about your tutorial. Community managers, your community. You'll have leaders in your community that would be brilliant at teaching other players how to play. As developers, we need to reach out to them and set them up. Heck, pay them and bring them in and let them build the tutorials and the things online, so that when your players do go looking, that you actually can control the message and control what the players are learning and when, and make sure that it makes sense and reflects what you want your games to be. So, if you're going to build a successful tutorial, understand explorative and modeling learning styles. Something I haven't said, and I usually save it to the end because it can color the way you listen to this information. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, modeling learners are predominantly female. Predominantly. Not completely. We do have a number of males who are modeling learners, but they're predominantly female. If you understand what a big market the female gamers are today, and I'm sure you all have heard all the numbers, 48% of gamers are female, 70% of the casual market is female. The vast number of the large player inputs come from females. The vast number of the social stickiness and social world of the games is led by females. Very, very important to your game. If we don't take that into consideration when we're building our tutorials, we're losing access to that resource for our games. Concentrate on your nouns and your verbs when you're building your game. For goodness sakes, keep it simple. Start at the beginning. Understand that not everybody comes to your game as a veteran of, my game is just like that one, so they all already know how to play. They may not. Consider leaving your tutorial separate from your gameplay. Keep it out of the actual game itself. Give them a safe place to practice the actual manual controls required to operate your game. Teach them how to operate the game. Don't teach them about the goals and the achievements. And control who teaches your players. Make sure you understand the message that you're giving out there. Make sure you are in control of the face that is presenting your game to your audience. All right. Now we have question time, because this usually brings up a lot of questions. So, come to the mic. Come up, step up to the mic. Tell me your name. Tell me your name and where you're from.
I'm Kyle, here from Madison. And one traditional tutorial technique that seems to be like a connecting point between the two styles is building up a language with the player, like how Mario will have coins that show you, oh, you can go here, it's safe because those coins leading there. I think this really got started with like Donkey Kong Country, where you're putting the bananas. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's kind of like that room to try to have your cake and eat it too, and build a language or a space that is much more inclusive of both kinds?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly. If you want them to follow the trail of bananas to get to where they need to go, as long as you tell them that's what they have to do, because if it's something I have to click on or do and I'm not told, I'm not going to do it. So make sure you give them the instructions to do that, and then sure, they can follow that. And remember what I said, modelers will slowly move towards explorative. So at some point, they will jump off and go, great, I understand it. Usually it's when they understand the interface. Once they understand actually physical manipulation that actually gives them the game, that's at the point where they go, right, okay, I'm ready to play, I understand. So yes, yeah, you can do stuff like that, sure.
Hi, I'm Heather. I'm from Chicago. So game manuals, like paper manuals, used to be so predominant and were a great resource for the modeling learners to actually, have somewhere to go. Would you say that with the, moving away from the paper manuals, I don't see those in any games at all anymore. Is it important to actually bring that into games as a virtual sort of manual? And do you have any good examples of that you've seen recently?
I wish I could say yes, but really bluntly, very few people actually read the manuals. I hate to say, I know, it's terrible. But actually, that's why I say they're moving to the online. You find a lot of the people that would have read a manual are actually going and searching online and getting.
Okay, so it's
somebody to talk to them. It's like sliding into that kind of a virtual world. Again, walls of text and things like that, just, they get click, how fast can I click past this?
So you mentioned control who is out there teaching your players how to play your game. Is it just a matter of not leaving a void? Publishing video game tutorials on doing things like Twitch and YouTube seems super easy these days. And so is it simply just not leaving a void, or would you recommend trying to get out and stop those sorts of things?
No, I wouldn't recommend trying to stop.
Yeah.
But just get out there and fill the void and make sure that you become the point of this is the real information. This is the actual information from the developers, and understand the style and make sure it's easily accessible and in that same kind of a style that we're seeing of the very popular YouTubers and vloggers and Twitch streamers. It's funny, there was a point in time back in the early days at Origin where there actually were conversations about personalities. Did we actually want to produce a game as Ultima, Richard Garriott's Ultima, Chris Roberts' Wing Commander? And the publishers at the time said no, that we didn't want those personalities because we didn't want them to have that much power. I think it may be time to rethink some of that and to go back to we are giving people are taking that power in the form of the streamers that have huge followings. So why would we not make it somebody that has the information we want to be out there in the face that we want to be seen? So I would say fill the void and make it an important.
So great follow-up question based on what you just said. The make it important, make it valuable. You could release pre-release information or find other ways to draw people into your channel rather than
Correct.
All right, thank you.
There's a lot of developers out there that have names. I mean, Cliffy B or any of the other that you could say, Warren Spector's going to come talk about this, and people will go to that channel to hear their developer that they know of or their designer that's got the reputation to hear them talk, and we should be leveraging that.
Hi, Sheri. Brian, currently Madison. Myself, personally, I'm a modeling learner, but I find myself cycling between modeling, validate, back to model more.
Yes.
What if you have any thought on later generation tutorials in the same game, right? Like, have you ever seen anything that does that, or had any thoughts on subsequent tutorials for more advanced concepts as you go along?
It's like if that enhancement system came in later.
Yes, like if we did that later, yes.
Because we have our modelers that do move to explorative, once they understand the interface, I would back it up and say, what do I need to do differently with this interface? What extra buttons do I need to click? What do I actually need to what do me, Sheri the player, what do I need to actually do with my keyboard or my controller to make that happen? And that's where I would make sure that that was covered if you're going to do the subsequent, because
Pacing of that, though. Like, on pacing, like how to basically figure out when you should be rolling out those extra lessons.
I'm not sure I understand. I would say when the new feature is coming out.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just, when the new feature is coming out and coming in, maybe as a prep, if you're doing a patch ahead of time and you want to be able to tell them ahead of time, this is coming, be prepared, this is how it's going to work. Letting them know ahead of time before they actually handle it is when you want to teach them.
You almost advocate a mini tutorial every major expansion or patch.
Absolutely. And honestly, I would not put it in the game. I'd put it someplace outside, so someplace they can go and play with the interface and see it before they go into the game to actually use it. Small side story, early on I was doing some consulting for Disney. And this is, okay, so I'm going to put on my old timer hat. This is not our first experience with VR, all the stuff that's going on now. We actually had a VR push back in the 90s, you remember? You remember the VR? Yeah, okay. So Disney was actually looking at moving some of their rides to a VR environment, and they called me and they said, we're doing, I can talk about it now because it's old, we're doing an Aladdin ride, and you get on a magic carpet and you control the magic carpet and you wear a VR headset, which were big headsets back then, and you control the carpet. And they said, we're having a problem. People sign this, NDA, and sign the thing, to the consent to be videoed during the ride, and we take them in and they put the headset on and we video them, and we ask them questions afterwards. And so we asked these people the questions, Did you like it? How did you enjoy it? And one of the things we ask is, would you recommend this to your friends? And we're having a problem because the women come in and they seem to be enjoying the ride. We've got them on video and they look like they're having a good time, but they're saying they wouldn't recommend it to their friends. What's going on? What's wrong? And I said, is this a headset? Big headset? And they said, yeah. I said, okay, take that headset out to the line before and let everybody handle it before they get on the ride, and let them put it on and see how it feels and how it's actually going to work. And they said, oh, we get it. Women don't want to mess their hair up. No, that's not it at all. Women, the modeling learners, women specifically, as I said, predominantly modeling, want to understand how it works before they're forced to do it. So let them see the headset. So this is what I say, let them see the interface and mess with it before they have to use it. So I said, just try that for me and just let me know how it works out. 20% increase immediately in the number of women who said they'd refer it to their friends, 20%, just by letting them handle the headset before they actually had to use it. Modeling learners. So, okay, all right, next question.
Matt, sort of Madison, San Francisco. I was going to ask you if you've ever come across in your work a relationship between like free-to-play and retail games and whether that affects tutorial design.
Actually hasn't, that we have seen at this point, we are not differentiating, but we try to make sure we cover a broad spectrum, and we're not seeing a difference yet at this time.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes I work in free-to-play a lot, and your audience is they could disappear at a drop of a hat.
Right,
Yeah.
they're that quick, and
Yeah.
this is why we need to talk about how they're handling this. Now, there's a benefit in some of the free-to-play, and I put this up here, and I pulled the slide out because I didn't want to go too long. One of the other things you can put your tutorial in the game is if it is a universally understood interface, solitaire. If it's a solitaire, I mean, anybody who's had a computer at any length of time has probably played some solitaire. Solitaire would not necessarily need a tutorial. But as I got thinking about it, you have to have a game that's so ubiquitous. There's very few. Match 3, which we see a lot of in the free-to-play, is becoming that kind of a ubiquitous interface where you may not have to spend a whole lot of time explaining to them, put your pointer here, put your finger here, drag over here. And you can use the little hands to show. So we're discovering that. So if you've got a really, really common interface, you don't have to explain it quite as much. But other than that, it's still, the modeling learning, the explorative learning still fits there. More questions?
Do you have any rules of thumb for how much text you can prompt the player with at any given time?
As little as possible. Seriously, we're down to counting words. And it's like, 10 words, 15 words. But that's numbers we don't have yet. That's some of the stuff we're looking at right now. Watch, hopefully there'll be a book on this subject coming out sometime, probably next year. But yeah. So the fewer the better. Also, you have all the language issues and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, which makes it really hard to teach an interface when you can't just print a bunch of words up there. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Susanna from Chicago. So as far as explorative learners and modeling learners, do you find that can change over a person's lifetime? Like maybe little kids are more likely to be explorative or something, or is that something that pretty much stays constant?
As far as we found, it stays constant. It more is in the individual experience that a player, like I said, will start a modeler. If they're a modeler, we've not seen exploratives that go back to modeling as much, though we have seen a number of exploratives that they into learning it, very explorative, but when a more complex system shows up, they back off into modeling. We do have some that are doing that. It's not very big, but we do have some. But it becomes a difference in how quickly they'll convert over to more explorative style is where we're seeing over their lifetime. But still, for the most part, I tell people it's kind of like, do you like broccoli or not? It's just kind of always there.
The difference between having more women and maybe more modeling learners, is that something that's specific to games, or do you find that to be a general phenomenon?
We're finding it kind of general. We're not doing a lot of looking outside of games because that's what we're working on, but when we're talking to them, again, anecdotal, the women seem to be saying, this is, and the men say, yeah, she always does that. And she's like, yeah, I know I'm modeling all the time. And it's kind of the old joke, right? The woman stands there and is looking at something and trying to figure it out, and the guy goes, let me do that. you know, and it's like, no. And the explorers get very, very frustrated with modelers because they think they're not moving fast enough. You know, just let me fix that for you. It's like, no, let me look at it until I understand what the ramifications are when I twist it, and then I'll do that. But, so we're seeing it, it does seem to be in everything. We're focusing primarily on games. Anything else? All right, here's my contact information. I'm always happy to answer questions and talk to people. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. I'm having a good time here. Thanks.